I'm Antoinette Miller, Director of Diversity and Inclusion for NBCUniversal. I've been with NBCUniversal for a little over a year, and before that, I was at HBO in talent acquisition for about 6 years in recruitment, and then also early career and running internship programs. So really excited to be here with you all today virtually. Without further ado, I'm going to pull up my presentation. And really quickly before we get started, I'd love if you all could just jot down in the chat what you hope to gain from this workshop. I have facilitated workshops for the Center for Communication before, and it's always great to just get a sense of who we have on the call, and then also what your goals and objectives are for this workshop. All right, give me 1 second. Okay. I'm just gonna pull up the chat as well, just so I can see what you all are saying. Awesome, a better idea of how to network during the pandemic, guidance on how to make right steps in the entertainment industry. Great, networking. Awesome, better way to network. Great, great. So hopefully I will touch on some of those questions that you all may have. I'm going to talk for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So definitely get your questions ready. So strategies for virtual networking and interviewing can be new to some of us. I know in this environment, it's really challenging to make those impressions. I'm an extrovert. And you all can't tell, but I am a little over 5'9". When I have on heels, I'm about 6'2" or so. And so I rely heavily on my in-person impression and being expressive. And that kind of gets tricky when you're virtual. So we're going to talk through some tips and tricks around how to make a more successful virtual impression. So quickly, here are the 3 points that we'll discuss. So professional branding, which I think is important. Before you can make an impression, you definitely need to know who you are and what impression you want to relay. And then we'll talk a little bit about making that virtual impression and virtual interviewing. So the power of a brand, and many of you, if you've, any of you who are on the call have heard me talk before, the power of a brand really is a number of things, but I think one of the things that really reigns true is that it's emotionally based. So anytime you're interacting with someone, it's how you make them feel that will help to kind of create what that brand exudes. It's also linked to performance and reputation. So you can be, best dressed, you can be book smart, street smart, smart all around. But if your performance does not connect back to how you show up aesthetically, it will leave that lasting impression on people. It's consistent. It's how you show up all the time. So as I mentioned, I'm expressive. I'm an extrovert. As much as I try, I cannot hold that in. And so that's how I show up. And people know that about me. My brand perceives me in that way. I'm loud. I'm energetic for the most part. And people tend to know when I'm not feeling too well because it shows, because my brand is typically the opposite of that. So I consistently have that. It's memorable and it's unique. One of the great things about your brand and who you are, it's you. One of my favorite quotes is, "Be yourself because everyone else is taken." And that is so, so true. So your brand is really much unique to you. So I want you all to take a few moments to answer some of these questions and just self-reflect on what your brand is and how you can figure that out. So what are you already known for? What are those things that multiple people will tell you about yourself when they don't even know each other? They're meeting you for the first time and they say, "Wow, you're so funny," or "Wow, you're so smart," or "Wow, I can always rely on you to get that project done." Those are the things that you are already known for. That's actually your brand being created for you just on a day-to-day basis. How do you define success? Success is defined in many different ways, and I think even the pandemic has showed us that success can be defined in multiple ways, and you have to be able to pivot and be flexible on what that success looks like. Years ago, success, when I was going into undergrad, success would probably look like my mom wanting me to be a lawyer or a doctor or some profession in that field. But we know that there's so many other successful avenues and career paths, and you don't also always have to be a doctor or a lawyer. You can do many other things. So how do you define success? What are your strengths? What are you, again, already innately known for? What are you already good at? And what contributions do you want to make, and what do you want to be remembered for? I want to be remembered as Antoinette, who's helped a lot of people. That's what I want to be remembered for. I want to be remembered for the information and knowledge that I was able to pass on to the next person so that they could be more successful. So think about those things and try to jot those down, because it will definitely help you self-evaluate what your brand is. Soft skills. So soft skills, I don't think are talked about enough. Sometimes we spend so much time on the technical skills, right? We know how to use certain tools and softwares. We can count, reading and writing. But what are those soft skills that sometimes are a little bit harder to teach, that are definitely attributes to your personal and professional brand? What are your communication skills like, verbal and written? What's your leadership ability? How do you manage time? And time management has been a true test for us, because every day is running into one. Every hour is running to one. I don't know if it's Sunday or Thursday. And I usually have to rely on my peers and just my calendar to help me keep track. But it is an interesting time, but you're still being kind of gauged on what your time management looks like. What's your work ethic? There's so many distractions right now. I'm somewhere in between my kitchen and my living room, and I could easily, lose track of time and get lazy, right? Some people can easily get lazy because you're in the comfort of your own home. But what about you is gonna go that extra mile? Maybe you wake up a little bit early, in the day, because you have that time, because you're not commuting to the office or you're not commuting to school, to get some of those projects done. What is your ability to build relationships? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. It is a little bit more tricky in the virtual environment, but it does have its benefits. So what is your ability to connect with people? Your level of engagement. Again, there's so many distractions around us in the world, in our personal lives. How do you continue to stay connected? How do you continue to stay engaged? And what is your adaptability like? In March, one day we were told that we were going to work from home as a trial period, and it's now September. Oh no, it's October actually, and we have not been back to work. So we had to quickly adapt to a work from home environment, work from home remote style in a matter of days. And so how have you been able to adapt to some of those changes is what I think really will define and help you understand what your brand is. And again, this is just another diagram of some of those points, just to sum up how you can help to build that authentic brand. Being yourself, your brand starts and ends with you, and no one can create that or take that from you. You can take personal inventory on what your personality is, your strengths and your weaknesses. And a lot of this will evolve. The strengths and weaknesses that I had 10 years ago are definitely not the same ones that I have today, and they will continue to evolve. So continuously taking that personal inventory is going to be important. Overselling or underselling yourselves. And I think there's a fine line with definitely confidence and arrogance, or also being mindful of straddling that fence and not diminishing what your contributions are. So try to not overpromise on what you can't deliver, but don't underpromise either. If you're good at something and someone else on your team isn't, raise your hand. Ask to work on that stretch assignment or that project so that people can see what you can bring to the table. And bring your best self. You know, a lot of what we're going to experience in the virtual environment is you do have that one chance to make that impression. So make it worthwhile, give it your best shot, because you only get one chance to do it. Talking about resumes really quickly. So your resume is really your brand on paper. So if you take some of those points that I just discussed in the previous slides, that is where you can kind of consider what your brand is on paper. You know, how do you tailor your strengths, your contributions to a role in marketing? How do you deliver that to a role in public relations? What if you want to be a reporter, an anchor? There's certain skill sets that are required for those occupations. So you want to be able to connect your brand back to what those are and get that on paper. It's an opportunity for you to introduce yourself and your skills. I call a resume kind of like the party invite, right? When you're trying to go to an event or a party, you want to know where it is, what you should wear, you know, maybe what DJ is spinning that night. And somehow your resume really is that. You are the party, and the employer wants to know what's going on with you before they decide to bring you in for an interview. So it's really important to, again, spend time figuring out who you are, and it'll lend for an easier way to outline that on paper. Your must-air points. So I learned this in grad school when I was at NYU, that whenever you're on air, you should always stick to your must-air points. So it's almost like your script. And so on paper, you don't need to put everything, you don't need to put your whole life story on your resume, but it's those key points that you want to convey that's going to attract an employer to want to know more about you. And your stats. I got this at kind of a reference from my husband, who watches sports all the time. And he was talking to me about your stats and how, as a basketball player, you need to know your stats. Know your stats, be familiar with them. I've had some instances where I've interviewed people in person, in the in-person world, and they're reading off of their resume. And it's like, to me, as if they don't know who they are. So know your stats, be familiar with your brand, practice it, which I'll reiterate again in a few more slides. Look in the mirror. We have a lot of time to do so right now. So definitely take that opportunity to know your stats and be able to convey them. So now we can talk a little bit more about making a virtual impression. Preparation is key, which I just mentioned. And my last bullet on this slide is practice, practice, practice. I cannot say that enough. You know, you have the opportunity, especially while we don't have some of the other kind of distractions externally, to be outside, and while we're on lockdown for many of us, definitely practicing your virtual impression is important. Taking all of those points around your brand and, you know, standing in the mirror and reviewing your resume and seeing how you show up. How do you make eye contact over the computer? What are some of those quirky things that you do, hand gestures and things like that you might need to manage. So preparation is really key. Knowing your audience and the business is probably one of the biggest, second biggest things that I think is important. You'd never want to get on a call with someone and you haven't at least referenced who they are, and you don't want to be in an interview situation where you're, you know, misinterpreting something about the company or the brand, or referencing a wrong instance. You know, I used to work at HBO, and a lot of times people would reference content or shows from other networks. And you definitely don't want to do that at NBC either. So definitely, if you're talking to someone like me who's a representative of NBC, you want to do some research on our content, some of our new platforms. We've recently launched Peacock. So you want to have a sense around that, because that's going to be important for balancing the conversation. Have your elevator pitch ready. Have just those few points that describe who you are in a few minutes, you know, 3 minutes or less. 3 minutes is actually even longer. You kind of probably want to do 1 minute or less, right? And so just how I opened up this session. Hi, my name is Antoinette Miller. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives at NBCUniversal. My focus is ERGs and workforce diversity initiatives, and I love to help people with a lens around diversity, equity, and inclusion and recruitment. And done. And now people have a quick snapshot of who you are, and then you can continue to build on the conversation. But make it conversational. You don't need to say it like a script, and I think that's where the practice will come into play if you have some of that conversational introduction in play. Log on early. For this session, I logged on maybe 10 minutes early. You never know what can happen. Your laptop dies, you know, the Wi-Fi is messed up. Have that backup plan. Log on early. Give yourself enough time to see how you show up in the camera. Make sure that there are no distractions around you. I think that is definitely going to be important. And if the person that you're waiting for takes longer, let them take their time. You are waiting to make that impression. So definitely 5 to 10 minutes early is my recommendation for logging on. And again, backup plan. Wi-Fi's are spotty. You know, again, laptops die. Make sure you have your devices plugged in. Make sure that, you know, if your Wi-Fi is spotty, tell the person that you're talking to that, hey, I might cut out. It's okay to do that. Transitioning to LinkedIn a little bit, and this is all a part of the virtual impression. So now more than ever, and I've always told people how important LinkedIn is, now more than ever, I think LinkedIn is important because we are really reliant on these virtual platforms to help us make those impressions. So you want to start with your photo, right? And that photo definitely helps to tell people what your brand is about, right? Even down to the color that you're wearing in your photo, the expression you have in your photo says a lot about who you are. And a photo is worth 1,000 words. So you definitely want to put some effort into how you're showing up on camera and making sure it's a high res photo. And I think most people have this down pat, especially in today's times, but definitely always important to know because I do see a variety of photos and sometimes your headshot doesn't showcase you in the best light as you would think it would. So pay attention to that photo. Other things to consider on LinkedIn just to kind of elevate your brand, aim to make at least 2 connections a month. Sometimes people are challenged with making those connections. It's actually, you know, it's easier for us to follow people on Instagram and request a friend on Facebook, but it's harder for us to make those connections on LinkedIn because it's a professional platform. But start with your immediate network. There are a lot of people on this call right now. Everyone's name is in the bottom corner. I would request everybody on LinkedIn because that's your network. Why not? Right? And if you don't want to do that, start with some of the people that you've gone to school with or some of the influencers that you aspire to be like or you like to follow, people that you work with, people that you want to connect with, maybe recruiters or professionals at different companies. You can connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn. Definitely connect. And it helps to not only just add to your network, but it also will help you gain information. A lot of the people that I'm connected to and that I follow share industry news or highlight industry professionals that I may not otherwise have known of. And it always helps to just add some information to my repertoire, so to speak. Ask for informational interviews. And I give the caveat that not everyone will be responsive and not everyone will have time to actually conduct an informational interview with you. But what the heck, send the note, right? If you don't send the note, you won't know if you had a chance of even having a conversation with someone. My LinkedIn inbox, forgive me, anyone who has sent me a note, is always exploding with people asking me questions or wanting to connect. And as much as I want to, humanly possible, I can't get to everyone at the same time. So still send a note. You know, you might hear from that person a month later, but it was still worth sending because for the most part, people will respond to you or at least point you in the right direction as to who you can connect with. Becoming an author, writing content on LinkedIn is also a way to get visibility and make more of an impression. Joining groups that are industry related, making sure people can find you. So definitely go to your settings and make sure that people can find you if they do a Google search, if they're looking up your name. That is how you're gonna become a little bit more visible. Put in the time to make it great. Yes, you know, a lot of it is from your resume. A lot of what you'll put on your LinkedIn is from your resume directly, but there are opportunities to add links and your reels, your portfolios. There's a lot that you can add to your LinkedIn that maybe you don't have room for on your 1 to 2 page resume. Follow company pages, follow NBCUniversal now. You know, right now, log on to LinkedIn and follow NBCUniversal. If it's a company of choice for you, you want to be following us. We're always putting out great content. My department, actually, diversity and inclusion, has its own page, and that's where we share real-time information about what's going on with the company, who works at the company, what the culture is like, the environment. Really getting a handle on what companies are doing is really essential, and LinkedIn offers that. And share good news. Today I shared that I would be presenting here, and so that has brought in my visibility in my network. People maybe who didn't know I facilitate workshops now know. And so that is great. If you've gotten a promotion, if you changed jobs, if you just did something great in the community, share that information. People want to know what you're doing, and there are always a lot of people who are around to help support you. So FaceTime, so you've done all that. You've got your brand together, you've got your resume intact, you know, you're now set up for an informational interview and you don't know what to do. You're stressed, there's anxiety. But again, once you've done all of those practice points, it'll be a little bit easier to have a conversational introduction. And it will run a little bit more smoothly as if you hadn't done the initial practice ahead of time. Disclaimer, I talked about this, you know, but I'll talk about it a little bit more. It's okay to give that disclaimer. I have a Yorkshire Terrier who loves to channel his wolf ancestors, and sometimes he is just howling right when I'm supposed to make a point in a meeting or I'm on an important call. I always give people a little heads up that, you know, he might say something in the background, or I put him up, obviously, if, you know, it becomes too distracting, but it's okay to give that disclaimer. I actually connected with a woman who I was stressed about my dog making noise. She was stressed about her dog making noise. And we're in this virtual environment trying to, you know, shush our dogs in the background and still have a conversation. And at the end of the call, we were showing our dogs, and now we're connected in that way. So sometimes that disclaimer can help to open up the conversation or connect you to that individual that you may not have figured out what that connection point is in the dialogue. Be situation appropriate, and I'll talk about, you know, dress code, all of those things. You know, make sure that you are situation appropriate. If it's a first impression, if you're just talking to someone for the first time, and again, you're not able to make that in-person impression that you normally would be able to make, and they're just getting this much of you on camera, be situation appropriate. You know, make sure you're showing up in the right way. You might want to be a little bit more buttoned up if it's a first impression, or if you're talking to someone in a leadership role. But if you're talking to maybe a peer or someone who is a colleague of yours, maybe you can come across a little bit more casual. So really pay attention to those clues. Body language, playing with your hair, making gestures. I talk with my hands a lot, so you all can't see it, but my hands are moving under my desk. You know, otherwise they'd be all here, and that's distracting, right? And so want to be mindful of that. Sometimes we do, you know, nervous laughs. Sometimes we get sweaty palms. Sometimes we use, you know, different body language or gestures to help us feel more comfortable. But sometimes it comes across as you're a little bit nervous or anxious. So you want to be mindful of that. I think leaning in is very important. You want to show that you're present. There's a difference between sitting all the way, you know, back here to leaning in and feeling like someone is connecting and talking to you, but not too close. I don't want to see everything up so close, but definitely lean in. It helps with your body language and how you're showing up, and it lets people know that you're engaged, you're attentive, and you're interested in what they have to say. Be mindful of your voice and tone. Again, when you get on the call, make sure the person can hear you. Make sure that maybe you're not talking too loud, too softly, because that's important. Your tone is also important. Try to smile while you're talking, maybe not too much so it's not an awkward smile, but just enough so that it makes you feel upbeat and confident, versus talking with suppressed shoulders and talking with a deeper tone that may not come across as well. And sending a follow-up note. That's another way to make that virtual impression, making sure to send a follow-up note and just say, nice to meet you on the panel today. Thought you did a great session, or thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's always great to kind of make those additional connections after you've spoken with someone virtually. So virtual interviewing, we talked about being prepared. Same thing goes as if it was an on-site interview. I would say definitely treat it as an on-site interview as much as you can. Dressing for success, I've seen actually executives across many companies show up in ways that I've never seen them before, in sweatshirts and more casual clothing. But if your interview is casual, that doesn't mean that you should be. Again, you're trying to make that impression, you're trying to get the job, and how you show up is going to be important. And your dress should be unique to you. There is no uniform, I would say, and I would say very much so that is becoming less and less of a thing. The uniform and some of what we've been taught is the appropriate and acceptable attire is no longer. So again, be situation appropriate, know the company that you're interviewing for, get a sense of what their dress code is, or how the people dress. But for an interview, I would say try to stay on the more formal side versus casual side. Be on time. I talked about this already. Log on early just to go through your notes, make sure you're showing up well, make sure you sound good. All of those things are very important. So action. So now it's time for your interview. These things go without saying for the most part, but again, so much is going on. We're so distracted. We're all kind of stressed in many different ways. So try to find a quiet environment. And again, if your environment isn't as quiet as you want it to be, let the interviewer know. Just give them a heads up. Hey, I've got, 2 roommates here that might be walking around, or, I live in a noisy street. Let them know so that you set that level of expectation with them so that they know that you're not careless in giving that information ahead of time. Balance the conversation. You don't want to just be a one-sided kind of talking head, right? And that is more present now. So you want to balance the conversation, find opportunities to interject, give the other person an opportunity to say something back. It'll lend for a better interview. And an interview is conversational, and you should definitely handle it that way. Look into the camera. Eye contact is still very important. For many of us, it's easy to look away or look to the side when we're talking, but that eye contact is really important. Not staring, but definitely just looking up. If you have to refer to your notes, glance at your notes and glance right back at the computer. Because again, while we're virtual, people may have different perceptions of how you're showing up and who you are. And you want to make sure that they are not thinking otherwise of you when that wasn't your intent. Ensure that you have sufficient lighting. I went out and purchased a ring light, which you see glaring against my glasses right now. I love it. It makes me show up nice and bright. If you've got dim lighting and you're in a dark place, in a darker setting. I know here in New York, the weather is changing. So some days are more cloudy and I can't rely on my natural sunlight that comes in. Get you a ring light. It's $10 or $20 on Amazon. It's good. It just brightens you up a little bit more and makes you just seem that much more upbeat and elevates your presence. And same thing, remove distracting items, anything that's going to cause confusion, anything that also may run bias around, who you are. I think a plain white background is fine. On Zoom, and I know Microsoft Teams, which we use at work, there are those, backgrounds that you can use. Definitely use some of those backgrounds. Make sure it's not, one of the funny ones that's got characters running all around. Make it a little bit more formal, clean, You know, minimal, I think is better than, you know, adding so many other things. Consider creating a set. I have a plant over here. This plant is usually on the other side of the room, but I added the plant today because I thought it would be a nice touch. Pull in things from, you know, your home, just to brighten up your space and add just a little bit of color and accent to your call. Answer and ask questions, keep them clear and concise. That goes without saying. You always want to have questions ready. I've been on a few calls recently where there are no questions, it's crickets. And it's so, I'm that person that will continue to prompt you just to help you out. I'll say, sure, you don't have any questions. And then I'll say something else. And then I'll say, you know, again, if you don't have any questions, and I'll ask that about 2 times just to see if you get the hint that ask me anything. If you're interested in the position, if you're interested in the employer, you're going to genuinely have questions to ask, or things are going to come up in the conversation. And since you've already done your research and you've already practiced, this is going to be a seamless thing for you to do. So coming up on our final slides, you know, a thank you makes a big difference. And I've got some questions recently about this idea that they can no longer send card thank you notes. And that is okay. We are moving into a new time. I think if you have the opportunity to get someone's address or, you know, have that insight, fine, send the card, but email will do fine. And an email is just more immediate as a follow-up, and you should send it to every person that you've talked to. If you're on a Zoom meeting or even on a networking call and there are 5 people on that call and you wanted to send a follow-up note, send a follow-up note to all 5 and make sure that you've addressed them in the appropriate way, that their names are spelled correctly, and going ahead and send that email. If you're not hired, continue to check the career site. We have a bunch of opportunities listed on NBCUniversal as a career website. A lot of great changes happening in the organization, so there are a lot of opportunities to take advantage of. But if you've interviewed with us and you're not immediately hired, that is okay. I interviewed at NBC 3 times before I got the job that I am in now. And so that was because I continued to check the career site. I had a positive attitude. I stayed connected with my recruiters, and that helped to lend to me landing my current job. So continue to check the site. Follow up, be strategic about it. You know, you don't want to follow up every week. Again, there's so much going on. And if you're having anxiety, so is everybody else in their own different ways. So be mindful of that. Be strategic about when you're following up, how you're following up. Don't be demanding. You know, if you haven't heard back from someone, be kind and just, you know, politely nudge them. Maybe they're overwhelmed in their own world. Maybe they're dealing with a lot. So think about how you're following up. Always reattach your updated resume, which is one of the points that I think people miss a lot. And, you know, when you're working at a company and you're in a recruitment capacity, you're dealing with, you know, looking at thousands, hundreds of resumes, profiles, you know, from all different sources. So reattach your resume. Maybe you've gotten some updates to your resume that you want me to look at and refer to. I remember names sometimes, but I can't remember everybody's name. So reattaching that resume is going to help to make an easy reference for me to know, okay, this is so-and-so from the Center for Communication Summit, and they need my help with getting connected to a recruiter. I can help them do that. And lastly, just a quick tips around our internship program. So NBCUniversal has an amazing internship program. For any of you who are interested in our internships, these are the main cities in which we have internship opportunities available. So definitely consider that. So we are on the West Coast, we are in Florida, we're in New York, Jersey, Connecticut. So definitely we have a lot of opportunities across the country for our internship program. We will continue internships. So we've been able as a company to continue a lot of our business operations that we've had in place when we weren't virtual. So there will be a spring 2021 program that will continue to be virtual. So definitely apply and keep your eye on the listings for that. And just a quick reminder about the different cycles we have. So there's a fall, spring, and summer program. Spring and fall are part-time programs. Summer is full-time. And again, they will all be remote. So our campus programs team have done a fantastic job of really seamlessly transitioning our interns and our early career folks to a remote working environment. So it's definitely still going to be a great and amazing experience. And again, virtually, there's still going to be those speaker series, professional workshops. My team works with the interns quite a bit. So it's really exciting. A lot of focus on just career development and helping young people navigate the organization. So really, really great. And hopefully some of you were able to tap into the Page 101 panel that we've had, and definitely our recruiters. I believe they did a networking session before, and they're going to do one again either today or tomorrow. So definitely take advantage of talking with them about some of what they have for the PAGE program and also our internship programs. And with that, thank you all. I hope I didn't go way over time, but if you have any questions, I'd love to see some of them in the chat. And we will just go from there. And I guess I'll toss it back to Faladay and Marissa to see if they have any closing remarks.
Hello. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. They were all very helpful tips. And I have a quick question. You mentioned how you apply 3 times before getting the job. And I was wondering, what did you do during those times while you were just applying and waiting for a job? And what do you think changed from your application from the first time you applied versus the 3rd time when you got the job?
What you all may not be aware of, and what I know now behind the scenes is, when you're as a recruiter managing the job process, you have one job and you have so many candidates. And while you'd love to hire everyone, you can only choose one person. So it becomes challenging for the recruitment team as well. And sometimes it's less about the individual, but it's about what's available and just making those decisions. So I know for the job that I was originally considered for, and actually NBC reached out to me on LinkedIn. So remember LinkedIn, they reached out to me. I had my mind on NBC, but I hadn't actually set out my application yet, but I had my resume ready. Always have your resume ready too, people. You can get a call anytime. So reached out to me, and they actually went internal. They selected an internal who was already a part of the company to find the job. And I just kept in contact with the recruiter, and I continued to also, look at opportunities at other companies because I didn't put all my eggs in one basket. But in the back of my mind, NBC was ideal, and I just knew that it was going to be a good fit for me. So I continued to massage my resume, stay in contact with the recruiter. I was patient in many ways, and I think that helped to resonate with the recruiter to say, you know what, maybe we didn't hire her for that job, but we still want to keep her in our pipeline for another opportunity. So it's always important. Again, keep your resume ready. Your LinkedIn, check your LinkedIn messages too. Sometimes in the midst of people reaching out to you about random things, there's a recruiter in there that sends you a note that says, hey, we have this opportunity, you want to talk, and you don't want to miss those notes. So hopefully that answers your question. But I think, again, always being prepared and just patience, humility. I didn't feel entitled to I should have gotten the job instead of whoever. It was just more about when my time comes, it will come, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And hopefully, that company will recognize it and hire me.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I was in a session before this, and they mentioned briefly about social media and how important that is. And I know you mentioned the importance of LinkedIn as a professional site, but I was wondering, what are your views on other social media etiquette? How important is it to have your Twitter in check and things like that?
So important. So, with all that's going on, I've been compelled. I want to what do they call them? Twitter fingers, where you're like, I have something to say and I want to contribute and I want to comment. I keep it to myself. And that's just because I have a responsibility and I'm in a position where I don't have that flexibility to do so, right? And so that is a choice that I have made professionally that you're gonna have to make. I have friends, they know me, I'm notorious. I'm like, don't take my picture. I was not here at the event with you. I don't care what's going on. I will claim that it's not me. I don't care what it is. I don't care if we just were at the bar. I don't care. Don't take my picture. My Instagram is private. I don't have Twitter. I'm going to delete Facebook at some point. I'm just having some internal challenges with letting go of Facebook, even though I never log on. But I would say if you're on the fence, definitely keep your stuff private. I've had, in just managing early career, I've had some colleagues, on the first day of the interns joining, I've had some colleagues come to me with the phone. Is this your intern? And I'm like, it is. And I'm gasping. And I'm like, that's not the person I see in the office with me, but on the weekends, this is who you are. And it's not about not being who you are. I think, again, that line is being stretched now because the rules are changing just with the pandemic and all that's going on. But I would say, again, back to your brand, what do you want to be remembered for? What's your reputation, and how do you want to be seen? So that's going to impact how you show up on the other platforms that you're a part of.
I'm at a school in the Midwest. I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, but I'm from the Chicago suburbs. And obviously, everything with the pandemic, it's a nightmare. But what it does is, for me, it opens up a lot of opportunity to do things like this, where I can, if this was hosted in person, I wouldn't be able to be there. Right. So I was wondering, for internships, obviously you said that everything is online. Does that allow for me to apply even though I won't be able to ever come into the office ever?
Yeah, that is a great point that you make, that there are some advantages to this virtual environment where we're able to have really more of a global reach. Not necessarily with the internship program, but just in general, now time and space is really not a factor, right? As long as you've got a computer Wi-Fi and you can log on, you're in. So yes, they are considering candidates from across the country. So definitely apply.